it's really frightening. I think Trump, like all authoritarians, really understands what journalism can do.
Do you bear that in mind in terms of your journalism, that you don't want a court case with Trump?
I mean, you don't want court cases full stop, but that is the worst reason not to do something.
So what is the threat to journalism from the current political environment we're in? Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast where we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is someone who spent the past decade running one of the most influential news organisations in the world, steering it through profound industry change, digital upheaval, and intense political pressure. Katharine Viner became the first woman to lead The Guardian in its 205-year history. Under her editorship, the paper has transformed its funding model, expanded globally, and fought to preserve the idea of independent public interest journalism at a time when trust in the media is under sustained strain. Kath, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
If you could change the world in any way, how would you change it?
So I have an absolute horror of sounding pretentious ever, Krishnan, but so this question seems guaranteed to drive pretentiousness, but I will try, which is, I think we change the world by providing citizens with good information, but I don't think facts on their own are enough. Facts are essential. We need to provide people with the information they need to understand the world, but we also need to give them ideas and stories and narratives and sort of human examples for how they can change the world, they can live a better life, they can bring hope to the world. And I think the two things, facts plus ideas, provide hope. And I think that's really important, particularly in these times where people are feeling frightened and powerless. I think it's really important that we bring hope.
I think most people have a sense of what they think the Guardian worldview is. And some will agree with it and some will disagree with it, or some will agree with a bit of it. I mean, do you have a very strong sense of what the Guardian stands for, what its view is on the big issues of the day?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've arrived at that through a lot of research. So I've read all the histories of The Guardian. And I think what's interesting I've noticed over different eras is that what The Guardian is different in different eras. And it is for the sort of editor of the day to call what it is. But it's based in certain principles, like a commitment to the public interest, a commitment to the public sphere, a commitment to liberalism and progressive ideas. But how you assess those is really, really different. So I tend to look back to, there was an editor who was in charge for 57 years. You say I've done a decade, I've done 11. He did 57 years, C.P. Scott. And he really laid out what he thought liberal journalism was. And that was, for the period, quite anti-colonial. It was progressive in terms of equality and that sort of thing. And I've used that as inspiration for what I think The Guardian should stand for now. But in fact, it's very, very broad. So I think something that a lot of people don't understand about The Guardian, we are the number one commercial news site in Britain, second only to the BBC. We are the number 5 news site, full stop, globally, all around the world. We are the number 5. So in the English language. So I think people are quite surprised to know that we're that big.
Yeah.
We're not niche. We're not sort of a niche progressive news organisation in the corner. We are, very mainstream. We are very full spectrum. We cover politics and we have lots of opinion, but we also have definitive sports coverage, definitive culture coverage. We're fantastic at well-being and a whole range of subjects. So it's important not just to see The Guardian through a political prism, but through everything that we offer.
When you say liberal and progressive, a lot of people will just say, well, they're Labour supporting. Is it that straightforward in Britain? Are you a Labour paper?
I always think that the way to think about it is that we support ideas and policies rather than people or parties. So, it's really important that we back policies that we like, even if they come from a party we don't like. So in recent memory, The Guardian backed the Lib Dems. I know, having read the histories, that The Guardian backed the Tories in the 40s. So there are examples of The Guardian not always backing Labour. Obviously, it was founded before the Labour Party. So, but no, I wouldn't say that we are a Labour paper, but we are progressive and liberal, and so we'll support those ideas.
And what is a Guardian reader For some people it's an insult. For some people it's, the Guardianista is a brand. Do you have a sense of what a Guardian reader is?
What are you saying? Sort of tofu eating, cereal munching.
Yeah,
yes,
the cliche of the trendy lefty.
Sounds great to me. Well, it's very interesting you should say that because, first of all, I think that shows the power of the brand, that people turn it into an insult. They don't do that with other news organisations, do they? So they do. They do. With not many.
Telegraph readers and all the rest of it or Sun readers might also be, depending on your point of view, I suppose.
Only a few, I'd say. But what's interesting is that when we do the research, so we do the research in Britain, so what you're talking about there, the sort of Guardianista, that is really only used in that way in this country, in Britain. And yet, even when we do the research on our audience here, we do have a surprising number of conservative supporting readers who, I think they like our journalism. Even more interesting, with America and 2/3 of the Guardian's audience is outside of the UK, with a huge number in the States. And lots of those supporters say lots of those readers say they support the Republican Party. A really surprising number. And I think it's because, in the States, we don't come with the baggage that we come with in the UK. People just experience us. They like our journalism because you can trust the journalism. It's very fact-based. It should be, if the facts change, we change the reporting. It should be based around that. And so they feel, well, this doesn't feel like it's got baggage, perhaps like some of our rivals in say, the New York Times and the Washington Post might do for those people. So we do have a surprising number of right-wing readers in the States. So I'm really careful about saying what a Guardian reader is and isn't, because we're a very broad church. We're a massive number of people all around the world read The Guardian.
But as an organisation, you are clear that you want to project values. And you want to, almost evangelise for them?
I wouldn't say evangelise. I think we take ideological positions in our editorial line. I think we, obviously the balance of our columnists is, there's a great quote from the 19th century where somebody said, "The Guardian is a debate between the centre and the left," which I think is, stands the test of time, although we also do encourage right-wing voices as appropriate. And I think, it has to be on appropriate issues, probably not on.
Do you think that stands in the current political climate in Britain and America?
Yeah.
Where that is not the key debate anymore, is it?
Around pluralism.
Well, no, I mean, if the key debate has been between the centre and the left.
Oh, right.
The debate that's coming down the road, or that we're already in, is between the centre and the left and the right. So, does that mean you have to change what you're doing there as well?
I think all of our columnists are alive to that. And I think a lot of what our columnists are grappling with, for example, in the UK, is how do you beat reform? How do you deal with reform? A lot of our columnists tackle in the States is, what is Trump doing to the body politic and how do we deal with that? Yes, it's very important that you live in the world you're in and don't try and pretend you live in a different world.
Yeah.
So what those positions are change. What I was meaning is that the balance of our columnists obviously is more on the liberal and the left. And the subjects we choose, I think, will be different. There are subjects that The Guardian focuses on that others won't focus on, and that's fine. I think the story selection might show what our ambitions are, what our values are, but the stories themselves should really be factual and fact-driven and reported in a way that could be reported anywhere else that was interested in public interest journalism.
And so what is your role there in the organisation in terms of value? Are they your values?
So we're lucky because I mentioned C.P. Scott, who was editor for 57 years. He laid down the values of The Guardian, which I think stand true today. But I think a big part of my job is to interpret Scott's words for the modern era. And this is how I came up with this idea about ideas, facts and ideas to drive hope. I think that's a way I interpret the modern. I think there was a time, perhaps a decade ago, when it was all about facts and maybe a bit longer. And it was so clear to me that was just not enough because they don't persuade people in the way that stories and narratives do, and ideas.
So just tell me about facts and hope.
Yes.
Do you want some? Yeah. No. What does that mean? And what are you pushing at?
Yeah. So I think I think there's a few ways that we do that, if you see what I mean, what build up to that. So the first one is about reporting, and that sounds really obvious, but I think particularly over the last decade where people were just churning out stories to hit search targets in Google, people forgot, not at The Guardian, but some news organisations forgot that actually what we're here for is stories. So that's on the ground reporting, it's exclusives, it's finding things out, it's investigating bad behaviour. And that is the absolute sort of heart of a news organisation. And I think that already gives hope to people, because it's like, you get a story sometimes where people punch the air. We did the carers allowance exclusive last year where it changed the law. And, it was just this sort of exciting moment when the law was changed, when it realised this great injustice had been done to carers. So I think there's hope just by holding powerful accountable on behalf of people, in behalf of society, on behalf of citizens. I always think it's important that journalists remember that we are citizens. We're not on top of society, we're sort of part of it. So I think reporting, I think this about driving, that we should provide ideas, not just critiques. I think there was a period when a lot of opinion journalism, again, not on The Guardian, but a lot of opinion journalism became just sort of everything is terrible. And I really think it's important, even if you're doing a column where you say everything is terrible, that you have at least a paragraph on how it could be done differently, how it could have been done differently, just a few ideas to give people a way out of it. I just don't think providing reams and reams of misery for audiences is enough.
I mean, television is definitely encountering this whole phenomenon of news avoidance. Are you?
I don't see that, actually, and I'm not sure I believe it. I think people are more engaged with the news than they've ever been. There might be sort of text avoidance. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that about telly, because I
mean, not at the moment. All our audiences are up, but I think over the last couple of years there have been periods when there's been a lot of commentary around the news, which is just, the news is so grim, I can't bear to watch it. And just anecdotally, I meet a lot more people now who say, I can't watch the news.
But your numbers are up.
But our numbers are up. But we're still talking about, essentially, not vast numbers, Channel 4 News audience, 600,000 or so. There are millions of people who aren't engaging with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's this point that although a lot of the news is quite bleak in recent years, I think our job is not just to say it's bleak. It's also to give people some new perspectives into it. I also think it's about the stuff we do that isn't about the news, that we do that in a kind of meaningful way, and so that's sort of sport and culture and so on. And this idea of things being nourishing, like I think people really hate scrolling. They do it and then they hate themselves afterwards. And I think it's to give people a really positive experience when they're engaging with The Guardian. I also think diversifying is a really important thing we are doing. That I think, if you're saying that the people who decide what is the news all come from exactly the same background, then they're going to have an extremely limited and frankly boring view of what should be in the day's news agenda. And if you open that as widely as possible, you just have much more exciting, engaging, diverse, varied news. So it's much less boring, much more interesting, and therefore much more exciting. And then finally, the final point I'd say is about collaborating. I really believe that news organisations in the public interest should collaborate with each other. We should say we're here for society and for citizens, not just for commercial benefit to beat that other news organisation or beat that one. I think we should work together. So there's my array of things for hope.
Yeah. and so where do you come from? When you talk about the diversity of background, what is your background?
So, I'm the first woman editor of The Guardian, and I'm the second state-educated editor in the 205 years. I'm from Yorkshire. My parents were teachers. It's interesting. I mean, I grew up thinking I was quite posh, and then I moved to London, and I felt not in any way posh. And everyone described me as working class because my parents were teachers. I don't consider myself that. But I've been surprised actually in how I'm written about, how often my class background comes up, which surprised me.
And how did you get into journalism? And did you ever intend to end up where you are now?
No. I was, I think I was, when I look back, I think I was just a bit clueless, to be honest. I was very focused on academic work. I remember mentioning becoming a journalist to a careers teacher, and she was like, no, that's for men in London. No, don't think. And it was just a sort of, and I was like, oh, right, okay, it's just for men in London. And it was sort of, it didn't dawn on me for years until I won a competition on The Guardian. In typical Guardian style, the prize was, come and edit the women's page for a week. We'll only pay your transport. Those are the days. No, I think they gave us 50 quid. But it was a really exciting experience to be in a newsroom. And so I went through all the university, didn't really do journalism. I felt very socially alienated. And then I went into The Guardian. I was like, oh, this is exciting.
So you went straight into The Guardian from the university?
I won this competition, but they didn't offer me a job, sadly. But the women's editor at the time, she took me to one side and she said, I think you're really good at this. And that was all I needed. And I've often thought about that, how people who might look confident or, sometimes you just need that push. So then I went away and did a few other jobs, and I came to The Guardian when I was, I think, 26, so a few years later.
And stayed there ever since?
That's right,
Just rising up?
I used to have this superstition that I would get the 63 bus from King's Cross, having been to see my family in Yorkshire, to Peckham, where I lived for a long time, and the 63 bus would go past The Guardian's offices, and I used to have this superstition that I had to just glance at the office, and if I did that every time I went past, then maybe one day I'd get to work there. It's pathetic, isn't it?
No, I mean, well, but also you become editor of The Guardian in a very unusual way. Guardian's sort of democratic when it comes to this. So tell us how you work.
That is a myth. Sadly, that is a myth. No, the Scott Trust, who owns The Guardian, recruits for the editor, and the union separately does an election. But the Scott Trust are very clear to make people understand that they can go against the staffing election that they decide. And it's actually.
But you won the election.
Yes, I did. It's only happened twice, the election, actually, for the last two editors. So yes, I did win it. Yes.
What did that feel like?
Well, I mean, it was great. Yeah, it was a very exciting moment. But I knew it was only stage one in the process. So I kept my head down till it was all over. The process was about 6 weeks. It was very intense. Yeah.
And did you? So I mean, at what point did you decide you wanted to be the boss? Because a lot of journalists go through their careers with absolutely no desire to become an editor or a manager. Why did you want to run the show?
I wouldn't say I always wanted to. I always wanted just to do really interesting jobs, and I really, really love editing, doing journalism. It's just, I find it so extremely pleasurable and interesting. So I just wanted to make sure I kept doing interesting jobs. And I'd say the first time it really occurred to me, so I launched Guardian Australia in 2013. I moved to Australia for 2 years, and there was this interesting situation where I was the most senior person awake. If everyone in London was asleep, then I was the most senior person awake. So I had to make a few big decisions. And I did find Australia a very welcoming place. I really enjoyed working there. And I think something happened to me in Australia that really gave me the confidence to think that I could go for it. So I'd say that's when it really started to crystallise. Yeah, I feel like I've got a lot to thank Australia for that.
And how do you fit in with the other newspaper editors, do you think? How similar or different are you?
Naming names.
No, you don't have to, or you can if you want.
I mean, I try and build good relationships with them. Is
there a breed still? I mean, of
what
the
do you
kind
think
of
the
person?
breed? What do you think the breed is, Krishna?
Well, I suppose it depends where in newspapers you're talking about. But there is, a pretty posh public school, Oxbridge kind of breed who are super confident, well-spoken, and have got an opinion for everything. And I suppose there's also a sort of a tabloid breed which can be a bit different.
I think a lot of tabloid journalists are also similarly.
I
think it's quite mixed up, to be honest. I wouldn't say. I don't think it's quite as you characterise anymore. Would be my sense.
So there isn't a type anymore, do you think?
Perhaps not so much. There are more women editors than there used to be, and so on. Yeah.
How important is confidence then? in being an editor?
I do think it's really important, but it doesn't have to be that sort of public school off-the-shelf confidence that you're describing. I think it can be a confidence that, I think my confidence comes from the fact that I know I'm only trying to do the best for The Guardian, and I feel I know so much about The Guardian and where it comes from and where it's going that I want to try and, I can interpret that. And it might as well be me. If it's not me, it probably will be one of those public school blokes you mentioned, so it might as well be me.
How do you think things are changing at the moment in terms of Trump and the rise of right-wing populism? And not just right-wing populism, actually, around the world in terms of the way truth in journalism is being challenged?
I think it's really frightening. I think Trump, like all authoritarians, really understands what journalism can do. Journalism is essential to a democracy. Journalism, therefore, needs to be controlled in an autocracy. And I think he's, we look at his close relationship with Hungary and then with strongmen leaders around the world, Turkey, India, so on. I think it's alarming, and he's got lots of people in his sights.
He hasn't come after The Guardian yet, has he? Which is sort of surprising, given you're a growing brand in America.
Yeah, we are. We have a really big audience in America, and we've got a big staff, and we're doing lots of great journalism. And there have been a couple of smaller legal issues, but no.
Do you worry about that? Do you bear that in mind in terms of your journalism, that you don't want a court case with Trump?
You don't want court cases full stop, but that is the worst reason not to do something. I think you just need to make sure that when you're doing something that is legally tricky anywhere, you've just got to really be sure that you know what you're saying and why. I always say, I just hate being surprised by something. If there's a story that's gone up that I haven't seen that we get legal interest on, that annoys me. Whereas if there's something we've thought really carefully about and we've dotted every I and crossed every T and done every right to reply, then we should go for it.
So you don't feel that you have to change the way you operate at the moment in this environment?
Not journalistically, no. No, I wouldn't say so. No, obviously there's sort of issues around travel and that sort of thing that we need to be careful around.
So what is the threat to journalism from the current political environment we're in, if there is one?
I think it's anything that would undermine how journalism operates. And if the main function of journalism in a democracy is holding the powerful to account, therein is why people don't like it. And so what often happens in autocracies is that they don't just come in and shut organisations down. They do much subtler things like that, tying you up in endless, expensive, years-long court cases, or undermining people's visas, or sometimes, as has happened recently in the States with the Washington Post journalist, ransacking somebody's home and that sort of thing. They make life very, very difficult for you, so you can't do your work rather than close you down.
And do you get access to all of those administrations and people still, given your position in the landscape, or do a lot of them shut you out? No,
we're pretty included. We've got American journalists who've worked for a long time in Washington, lots of them, and so they're people who know the system. So so far, so good.
For us, I think, when we are in a situation where, you might have a government that's not giving you interviews or giving you access or whatever it is, your response is, well, you've got to respond with journalism. You've got to respond with stories that reveal things. How do you feel you can do your job and offer hope and ideas in a world where the right is on the march and is dominant in this country and in America? And those people, I imagine, I don't know whether the last time Nigel Farage did an interview with The Guardian, but I presume you're not his favourite. And the same with Trump.
I guess the question is that do you need those interviews in order to tell the story? And I think, it's, as you mentioned, it is about exposing things is the most important thing. It's also on the ground reporting. I think it's about sort of holding your nerve, being who you are, saying this is who we are, and we're going to keep being who we are until we can't. I think there's lots of examples from the history of The Guardian where, obviously there's certain times when you can't. There's an amazing story. One of the histories about a reporter in Berlin in the 30s who was Jewish, who didn't want to leave, and the editor forced him to leave against his own judgment, because they said they thought, and probably saved his life, I think. I feel very strongly that you should just stay alert to things that are changing, and if they change, you change. But, you have to stay committed to who you are throughout all of that.
The big thing that's changing, obviously, is the way people consume the media.
Right.
So where does that leave you as a news? Do you think of yourself as a newspaper or as a media organisation, or
We haven't talked about ourselves as a newspaper for a very long time. I'd say it's still an important part of what we do, but no, we're a global media organisation or global news organisation.
But you're producing a huge amount of words every day, I would imagine.
Something like 2 novels worth every day.
2 novels a day. I mean, do you feel that you will inevitably be pushed into a world where you are producing more video and images, because that's what people are watching on their phones?
Yeah, so we've already announced something along those lines. So last year we commissioned a sort of strategic review, called it Project Berger, after John Berger, author of Ways of Seeing, about how can we be more visual. I said I was not going to be pretentious on this podcast, but there you are. But so I think the way we approach these changes that you're talking about, I think we need to be more global, because our global imprint, as we've discussed, is so massive. To be more collaborative with each other, and then finally to be more visual. So yes, we're investing a lot in visuals and video podcasts and so on. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think the Guardian isn't just words, it's all sorts of things. We've done podcasts for a long time that have been very successful. We've done video. We were the first news organisation in the world to win an Oscar. First newspaper organisation in the world. Sorry, we beat the New York Times by 1 year. That's why I was very pleased about that. So we've done this for a long time. We've won BAFTAs as well. So and Emmys. We've been, and now we're just going to lean more into that.
Will you produce fewer words, do you think? As you go on? I
think so in time. I mean, I think there's an interesting thing we found in recent years. We do lots of really impactful long reads and big articles. They are doing really, really well. I think that what we've talked about for a long time also is that those stories that are perhaps the mid-length, the old-fashioned newspaper, page 17, shorter stories, I think they're of less value than they used to be.
People just don't read them all.
Not in the same way, I think. But there's different ways of doing stories as it is. Explainers are very successful. I think people want to understand what's going on. And I just think, my ideal scenario for the next few years is we get another big exclusive, and we do the sorts of journalism we would have always done. So the big news story and so on, and a podcast. But we would also do a video and an explainer, and we'd do a really nice TikTok to go with it, and an Instagram reel. I mean, it's just a way of taking that really important story to lots of different audiences. And
so how do you see yourself in relation to the public service broadcasters in Britain? Do you see yourself as a rival or a different kind of service, or?
I really think it's helpful for journalists in the public interest to not see ourselves as rivals, but to see ourselves as increasing the value of the public space and the public sphere. So I would see as that we should all kind of work together to, if we're committed to good information, to sort of get as much good information out there as possible.
Because obviously the big difference between you and us is that we have to live within the Ofcom code. We have to be duly impartial and all of that. And you don't. And in the current climate, that means you can assemble a tribe much more easily, or different tribes, as you say. You might have, some right-wing, audience as well who like what you do, but you can have people who embrace your values much more easily, which could see you sort of replace not just the Guardian, but other big media groups, make public service broadcasters not irrelevant, but struggling to survive.
I personally think there's a place for everybody. The ones who are interested in public interest journalism. I mean, I think the bigger challenge is what's happening with GB News, and Ofcom seems fine with that.
What do you think of that?
Couldn't you tell by the way I said it? I'm surprised they're so relaxed about it. Yeah.
Do you think it's a corrosive impact? You're reluctant to criticise them.
I wish I hadn't raised it.
I've criticised them.
Yeah, no, clearly I do think it's corrosive, and I'm amazed that politicians, current politicians presenting shows is so seen as so acceptable. Yeah.
It's become quite a deep knitted part of our politics, though, now, hasn't it? I mean,
very quickly. It's been very effective.
And do you think? Well, how effective is it? Do you think?
Well, I'm just thinking of reforms numbers in the opinion polls.
Do you think it's instrumental?
I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I think there's lots of reasons for reform success in the polls. Although I think what's happened in Wales recently has been an interesting counterbalance to that, and shows that actually people just want change. They're not necessarily minding who provides that change.
I mean, is that the kind of thing that you are thinking about when you say your writers are thinking about how to defeat reform?
The column is,
Do you think The Guardian, might end up playing a role in tactical voting and telling people how they could keep reform out in their area? Is that what you see your role as? Because that's quite an intervention in politics, isn't it?
We don't consider ourselves as sort of political. We're sort of, we are journalists. But actually, for a long time, our editorial leader line has encouraged tactical voting in elections, and I wouldn't be surprised if we did that again.
Well, how does The Guardian decide who it backs? How does that happen?
So this again is a very different process than from other news organisations. Not that I'm saying that Rupert Murdoch tells them who to back in an election. I'm sure he doesn't let his views be known in any way, shape or form. What we do, we have a meeting that any journalist can come to. So we get the biggest room we've got, and everyone piles in and they give their points of view. And I usually asked, last time we asked a handful of columnists to make the case for each party. The person making the case, the choice was, I really want everyone to know this is not my view, I'm just making the case. So it's like a sort of a debate. And then the chief leader writer and I took everything away from what came from that. And then, it is my final call, but I would see that to come out from the guy. I mean, you can imagine that we've got quite a lot of people in the room who don't want us to back Labour even in any circumstances because they think they're sellouts or whatever. And then you've got people who say that we should be more focused on Lib Dems and tactical voting and so on. So you just bring it all together. But we decide ultimately. But a lot of people feed into it.
I mean, do you think we're seeing a return to that? I mean, maybe we should talk about the Corbyn years. I mean, what were the Corbyn years like on The Guardian? Were they sort of hotly contested?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been editor for about a month, I think, when he was elected, and it was a bit of a shock, I have to say. The social media, I mean, that was it was a real big shock that. It was when I understood how much in the crosshairs The Guardian was going to be from thenceforth. And, it was, The Guardian is the sort of place where people really like to debate things. And we have an open morning conference every single day, 10 a.m., that anyone can come to, and if they wish, criticise the previous day's coverage. And we have had that. It's uncomfortable and it's really good. I think it is really unusual setup. And so, yes, I would say in the Corbyn years, we had more of that than at other times. Yes.
And do you think we're returning to that a little bit, where people on the centre-left and left, and the centre are sort of more divided over what the future might be, with the emergence of the Greens as a left-wing alternative?
Possibly. I think my sense is that sort of stopping reform is the most important thing. So that might actually unite people. But we'll see. I mean, there's obviously some time to go before the next election, presumably.
What one would presume. and how? So wait. So when you say there are debates, how diverse is opinion in The Guardian? Again, the cliche, I suppose, is that it's a monoculture, that you've got to be ultra woke and all of those things. Is that true?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with being woke. And again, woke is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? I mean, people define it as they wish. So we're quite happy to be, anti-racist and,
woke is
pro-women
good.
And sorry,
woke is good still.
And
it's very unusual. People used to make that case a lot. It's quite unusual now to find someone who wants to do that.
Woke. It depends what you mean by woke. I think if it means anti-racism and being, anti-sexism, anti-misogyny, I'm all in.
Very happy to be there. Yeah.
And I think, but I really have done my best to try and encourage pluralism in The Guardian. I think you're right. Some people might find it nerve-wracking to raise certain issues. But, we have this slot, which no other news organisation has, this open conference at 10 a.m. every day. We are providing the space for pluralism, and we can try and encourage it. I always say that, if you say something, I'll never leave you hanging. I'll always come in behind you and say, thank you very much for making that comment. So I personally will always support people. But I think we've had some great discussions recently, around really some quite complicated issues, and I've been really pleased about it.
Is there, for example, diversity around the trans debate, which has obviously come back in quite a big way in terms of Supreme Court ruling and forthcoming guidance on things like bathrooms and all of that stuff? Is that stuff that is debated within The Guardian, or does everybody kind of basically think the same thing?
Everybody doesn't think the same thing, and it is debated in The Guardian. I mean, perhaps, not as much as you might expect. I'd say Israel-Gaza gets debated more readily, I'd say.
And there's more disagreement.
It's complicated, yeah.
If people on social media are trying to push you in one direction, maybe they're trying to push you towards the Greens because they think the government's failing, how do you see your response? How do you decide what to do?
I think our job is to sort of tune out all the attacks, all the sort of pressure, which can come from all angles, actually, to tune it all out and try and think, what do we think? What do we think about their policies? What do they think about their ideas? What do we think about what's going on in the country from our on-the-ground reporting and what our reporters tell us? And try and make that the focus.
Now, what about the next generation, the next Katharine Viners? A lot of journalists now think, well, it's all over. There aren't going to be any jobs. It's all going to be done by AI. What do you think?
No, I don't agree with that at all, actually. I think it's a really exciting moment, partly because we don't know what's going to happen next. There's lots of advantages to AI. I think it could be very useful for us. It already is useful for investigative journalism and so on. But I think in the stuff that faces our audiences, that faces the readers, overwhelmingly it needs to be done by people. It needs to have a voice. It needs to be human. It needs to be, if anything, more voice and more human than. So I think it's actually it's a real moment where we can define what that looks like. There's nothing that beats journalism for an interesting day at work. What
are you looking for in the next generation?
Well, right now, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about the Project Verger idea and more visual, and a lot of that is about how do we find audiences in different ways. And I think there's some, influencers are much maligned, often for good reason. They're often not based in good information and so on, but they do really know how to build good relationships with their audiences. They do understand the context they're in. They do know how to talk to people in an accessible way. And I think if you can imagine pairing that with the best bits of Guardian journalism, like fact-based information, transparently funded, you put those two things together, you could end up with something quite exciting. So if there's people, what we're looking for right now, and we're hiring, is journalists who understand that influencing space and understand the sort of what the Guardian stands for and can think of clever ways to put them together in a way that means people will still trust what they read, and they will access it in new ways.
And do you still have the money to do investigations, foreign coverage, all of those sorts of things? Or are those things that may slip away?
Absolutely not. No, these are those things. We have never, I have never cut international coverage, even when we lost 450 headcount from The Guardian in 2016. We did not cut international coverage because I think that's so important for The Guardian. I've tripled the size of the investigations team. It's absolutely what we're here for. But I think we can find ways to get the journalism that they get, then tell it in different ways and tell it on social media and tell it in more and in accessible ways. But no, it's about both. It's definitely about both.
And do you think the mindset needs to be at all different given the political environment we're in? I mean, I think when I was starting out, we used to talk a lot about curiosity and wanting to hold power to account. But nowadays, it's in a much more angry setting where power will push back. Audiences will push back. They will attack you. You've got to be a bit tougher now, haven't you, if you want to hold power to account?
It's harder. But I think, again, what you do is you really do it in a very thoughtful, rigorous way. You do it really carefully. If you're going to expose somebody, you've got to make sure you've got it right in every aspect, and then you go for it. So I think, you do have to be tough to be a journalist, but I think you have to be tough in all sorts of spheres these days.
And can you see The Guardian carrying AI journalism or AI writing?
I can't imagine a scenario where that would be appropriate. But one thing we know is that we just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think people are making all kinds of cases for AI, positive and negative, but none of them actually knows where we're going to end up. So I think we just have to stay alert. Currently, I think AI is very useful in the background. It's very useful to our business, and it's very useful in investigative journalism. This ploughing into 50-page reports, and you can do it in 15 minutes rather than a couple of days. It's really, really useful for things like that. But I can't. My instinct is that what audiences need is actually something that is very human and recognisably so.
So student journalists should remain hopeful.
Absolutely, come do it. It's great fun. It really is fun.
Kath Viner, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for showing your way to change the world. I hope you enjoyed that. You can watch all of these interviews on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel. Until next time, bye-bye.